Hi, Dave Cook here with a fresh update on my scrolling beat 'em up book, which still doesn't have a release date yet, or an official title, or publisher reveal. All those things have happened behind the scenes, but because the world is a bit crazy right now, we'll just announce all that in due course. But this video is because I just passed the milestone this week of 100,000 words. And it's already since then way past that. So I'm still working on it. But the finish line is in sight now for the final draft, so that's good. And right now it's kind of rewriting the biggest features in the book. That's all I've got left to revisit and sort of redraft the big features. And those will be games like the classics, the true classics. So like Double Dragon, Final Fight, the Streets of Rage quadrilogy. Um, so all four games are getting a big double page feature, maybe some little extra things that we'll reveal nearer the time. And yeah, so the heavy hitters are getting some nice love in the book. So they'll be getting, at a minimum, a 4 page spread, so that will be a write up of the book, and then maybe like a nice double page art feature, or a boss rush, going down all the game's bosses, or character sheets, sprite sheets, that kind of thing. We've got a few interviews as well, which we haven't revealed. Although we did reveal one, which was Drew Maniscalco, who is the creator and lead designer on a game called Ninja Baseball Batman. And that's a real game. I'm not making that up. Ninja Baseball Batman. It's incredible. It's such a good game. So I recommend seeking that out. So yeah, we've got some extra things in there too. So I think what I wanted to just chat about is give people a bit more insight into the journey of these 10,000 words, some of the cool games that I've played that I've never played before, and yeah, just to share some things that I've learned along the way. So I think in a weird way, I think I've almost now played every game in this genre, which is kind of mind blowing to say myself, but I think the total game count now is over 215 games in the genre, something like that. There are a few games that are out of production, you can't buy them anywhere, but the emulation files no longer work. So there were some games that sadly I couldn't play, things like Annie-san, which is a PC Engine beat 'em up, Legionnaire, The Gladiator, things like that. So unless I can find another way to play them, they may get an honourable mention somewhere in the book, but otherwise, there was no way. I mean, I don't want to write about games that I've never played. That wouldn't feel honest. So I've played every single game in the book, quite a lot of them to completion because I just couldn't stop. um, so yeah, I've got a lot of experience now with the genre, which is great. So I guess like there's a few things that sort of come to mind. It's like I think I'm not overly critical of these games because I love the genre so much. It's definitely some things now though that I do pick up on a bit more now that I having played the whole genre pretty much, that has given me more of a negative view of some of these games now. So there's just some things that other games do better than others, and I'll give you some examples. So um, scrolling beat 'em ups where the enemies can hit you back through your own combos. The only way I can explain this is the Streets of Rage 1, 2, and 3. When you hit enemies, they get rooted to the spot and they get stunned, which means, as you would if you got punched in the face, you wouldn't be able to instantly, you know, you'd be kind of dazed. And throughout the book, I call that a stun lock, and I think that's sort of parlance. That's the way that people word it in general. So when an enemy is stun locked on the ground, it means you can get your combo off without a cheap shot from the AI. The enemy can just magically punch you back while you're beating them up. It doesn't make sense. Actually breaks the flow of combat, and it's a cheap move from the AI characters. Not AI, they're kind of scripted, but um, it's just cheap. So there's no real strategy to take down enemies if they can just hit you back through your own attacks. Those are the games that I think feel really scrappy. There's a few examples. None of them come to mind straight away, but there are quite a lot of examples of that in the book, and it just feels, I don't know. There's something about it that just breaks the flow, and it just frustrates you a bit, I think. Also, there's things like tracking, so uh, enemies that can, when, so belt scrolling, side scrolling beat 'em ups, you can walk up and down the screen like that. Sometimes in these games, when you stand parallel with an enemy, they'll do like a charge attack, or like they'll shoot a gun or slide kick. A good example are the Y signals from Streets of Rage, and this is a tip you can use. You can almost like guarantee on the higher difficulty settings, if you're walking up and down the screen and there's a Y signal walking about, once you meet like that, they'll try and slide kick you. So that's fine. But when I walk down the screen, I don't expect the enemy to curve their attack and hit me every single time. I call that tracking in the book, and again, that's another game critique sort of terminology. The enemy tracking sometimes is too good, so there's no way to dodge attacks effectively unless you get lucky. Again, it feels sloppy, it doesn't feel too tight from a combat perspective, and it just annoys people. So yeah, that's something that I find as well. Uh, Lack of certain moves. I mean, fair enough. Games like Double Dragon had fewer inputs. That's fine. Different time. But then you get a more modern beat 'em up where your only option is a melee combo, a jump kick, and maybe the option to throw people. No special moves. Games like Final Fight, for example. Most of the Capcom arcade brawlers had you press two buttons at once, usually jump and punch, and you do a special move. If the special move hits, then you lose some health. It's a great bit of risk reward mechanics to stop you from spamming special moves all the time and just only using them at the right time. But games that don't have any kind of like special move or anything that sets the character apart. A good example of that is DD Crew by Sega. That game has such a big fan base, but I cannot stand it. I think a lot of people rise to its challenge. It's a kind of janky kind of game where the combat's a bit ropey, the hitboxes are a bit weird, but you can still learn to get good at it, like any other game. I just choose not to because it just frustrates me. Again, what I was saying there about the parallels, I could be right in front of an enemy, dead center, my punches will go right through them. That to me is not fun. When the hit detection just does not work. Really not a fan of that. I mean, there's a few other things as well. I mean, that aren't as severe as that, so they're not really worth calling out here. But those are a few examples of things I've noticed that will break the enjoyment of a game, I think, for me now, personally. Again, everyone's different, but those are some things that I notice now more than I did before I did the book. So it's been a bit of a learning experience from that perspective. Interestingly as well, though, there's a few things that evolved over time in a positive way. I actually finished my redraft of Capcom's Dynasty Wars, not to be confused with Dynasty Warriors by Omega Force and Koei. Dynasty Wars is based on a manga, Japanese manga that is set around the romance of the Three Kingdoms, the feudal China, Chinese warlords, that kind of thing. And yeah, that game is entirely on horseback, and which is weird. It's kind of like a strange kind of beat 'em up RPG hybrid where you can level up, that kind of thing. But it was the first example of Capcom putting RPG mechanics into its side-scrolling beat 'em ups. Of course, they went on to do that with everything from Knights of the Round, King of Dragons, Dungeons and Dragons, Tower of Doom, and Shadow over Mystara. They had great RPG leveling mechanics. And other developers over time started to use these things as well, but it was kind of Capcom that applied that to the arcade setting and really made it sing. Of course, in the home formats, you had things like River City Ransom had a leveling up mechanic, which I credit in the book as being one of the first examples of a side-scrolling beat 'em up saying, could this genre become also a role-playing game? And I think in a weird way, with all the sort of leveling up and skills that you can unlock and grinding money to spend in the shops, these are all things you'd find in games like Final Fantasy, Dragon Quest. So yeah, it's a weird hybrid, I think, River City Rumble, hybrid of beat 'em ups and RPGs, which I think was so innovative for its time. Other things as well, like the uh, inclusion of things like scrolling level paths. Over time, certainly one of the best examples I can think of is the arcade only Golden Axe sequel, which never got a home port. Although it is coming out as a one-up arcade machine soon, so maybe we'll get fingers crossed we'll get a home port soon. It's Golden Axe: The Revenge of Death Adder. It's a great game, so good. And it's such a shame that more people don't know about it because it's way better than Golden Axe 3. And actually, you might call me a blasphemer for this, but it's true. Way better than the first two originals, even on the Mega Drive. It's such a good game. But it had like branching level paths that took you to very different levels. It wasn't just a gimmick, like you went to properly different levels, and it gave the game so much more replay value. But over time, I'm not saying Golden Axe pioneered this, but over time, yeah, into the 90s and beyond, the branching level system really took off. It was in a lot more games, which was nice to see. More things as well, like directional inputs. Like when I say directional inputs, I mean things like the command list from games like Street Fighter or Tekken, where you have to put in a lot of D-pad combinations or joystick combinations, then a button to pull off like a Hadoken or a Dragon Punch. You didn't really see that a lot in many side-scrolling beat 'em ups to begin with, but it really expanded over time. There are so many games that out there. Even in fact, Golden Axe 3, which I mentioned, even has special moves where if you don't have the manual for those games, you wouldn't know that they existed. Because I don't think things like the Mega Drive collection, I don't think explains that they how to do them. But yeah, you're doing things like again to use a Street Fighter reference of Zangief, like two 360-degree circles, then jump and punch will do like a special body slam move and things like that. It's really like in depth kind of stuff, which is great to see. Final Fight 3 did it as well. There's even a super gauge in that game, which is a bit like Street Fighter Alpha or Super Street Fighter, where you build up meter and you can do like an ultimate attack by doing like a really complex input, and then some buttons to do it. So it's almost like a cross between tournament fighting games like Street Fighter and belt scrolling games like Streets of Rage together, and it works really well. That got more popular over time as well. I mean, you look at games more recently like River City Girls, which has a huge command list of like directional inputs and different things that you can do to pull off special attacks, and it's a command list that grows and grows and grows the more moves that you buy. It's impressive stuff, really impressive. So that was a big thing as well. And I mean, the genre as a whole is kind of it's interesting because it although I'm saying it's more complex now because of all these mechanics, it was always quite complex. I mean, when you think about what's going on in a side-scrolling beat 'em up, the enemies have to move in sync with you, they have to attack, and it was all kind of scripted, and there's so much going on screen at any one time. I could write another book about how to manipulate the scripting in Streets of Rage 2 to make it way easier. It's a bit like Pac-Man, where the ghosts move in relation to where Pac-Man is on the screen. So if you take a left turn, some ghosts will turn right, and all that kind of thing. Streets of Rage is full of that. You can manipulate where enemies walk based on how you move. I'll maybe do a side video just on Streets of Rage 2 at some point because that's my favourite game of all time. I've kind of studied it inside out, and it's very very clever. Some of the stuff that's going on in that. But yeah, these are complex games, although they feel quite mindless to play. You're just bashing buttons and beating people up. It's the purest form of entertainment. But there's a lot of stuff going on under the surface. So hopefully from the book you'll get a lot of that stuff too. Trivia, neat little mechanics, cheats, some funny things about localization. Some games are so different in Japan than they are here. Lots of cuts made and changes made. One of the earliest examples is Renegade, which was actually in Japan released as the first Kunio game. So Kunio is the series that includes River City Ransom, River City Girls, Super Dodgeball, and the original Renegade. In Japan, it was released as Kunio, Hot-Blooded Tough Guy was the loosely translated name. But here in the West, it was released as Renegade, and the visual style was changed to make it look more like Walter Hill's movie The Warriors. But the first boss looks like he is a warrior from the movie, so with a red waistcoat and everything. So it's interesting. There's a lot of games that have changed a lot depending which market they're in. And yeah, I mean, this is just a video just to let you know some things that I've learned and that I'm going to include them in the book so you can learn them too. So hopefully, even if you're like really into the genre, hopefully this will reveal some things to you that you didn't know before. And if you did, hopefully it's just a nice compilation of all that knowledge in one handy book that you can reference and use to find new games to play and whatnot. So yeah, I'm just going to wrap it up here. But yeah, 100,000 words and counting. And we're not far from the end of the writing phase now. Then we can move into design, and then hopefully the publisher will be able to do a full reveal once we've got actual visual pages to show. So yeah, coming together nicely. And as always, thank you for your support. And yeah, I'll do another video soon on something else. Thanks very much, guys. Cheers.